So 1 Peter chapter 1 verse 8 says, even though you have seen him, you love him. And even though you do not see him now, you believe in him and are filled with unspeakable joy and glory. So the questions that I need to ask to you, dear ones, is, do you love him? This is an assumption for us, but Peter knew that these brothers and sisters loved him. I mean, they were dying for him. They had not seen Christ. He had already died and was resurrected and is seated at the right hand of the Father, but they loved him, because to become a Christian in this time was a death penalty. So they loved him, and even though they didn't see him now, they believed him, and they were filled with unspeakable joy and glory. So here's a question for you. If somebody had been watching you and you didn't know it, and they'd watched you over the course of the last 4 years, do you think that they would conclude that you loved Christ? Or would they have concluded that your love rested upon yourself? Does that make sense? So like, there's somebody watching you all the time. They're looking at your life. They're watching you. And it's not that you do or don't say, I love Christ, or I don't love Christ. And it's not that you are going to the church services occasionally or most of the time that tells somebody if you love Christ. It's what you're doing in and out. What is your spare time filled with? And what is your life's purpose? If it's just about playing games or, self-preservation, then they might conclude that you don't love Christ. Does that make sense? So, this is important to ask yourself. Because probably most of you tell yourself, oh, I love Christ, I love Christ. I ask my children all the time, do you love Jesus? Like my little ones, the 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 year olds. And they all say, yes, I love him. And I'm saying, well, then you need to not hit your brother and sister, because if you love Christ, he tells us to be good to every people or everybody and love our enemies and so forth, or whatever. So, here's another question. Because of Christ, worshiping the Holy Trinity and going to the services, does this fill you with unspeakable joy? Does praying, does reading about Christ, does going to the services to worship in the community of believers, is this what gives you unspeakable joy? Or when the next video game comes out, does that give you unspeakable joy? Or the next, what are they called?
Movie.
The Marvel movie, or what are these called? Avengers. Yeah. I thought that was a cartoon actually for a long time. And they're like, no, that's like Spider-Man stuff. Oh. Anyway, so what is it that gives you excitement? What's like, this is my favorite part of life: hunting, fishing, porn, video games, watching movies. So this is a starting point for looking at yourself. Where are your affections? Have you placed yourself or things or activities in the place of God? Have you placed yourself or activities in the place of God? This is where we ask, so we can begin to start getting ourselves oriented. Because if you're trying to make something strong, but that thing is being strengthened in some application that it was not intended for, when it switches over to its actual application, it'll just break. So if you're strengthening yourselves in entertainment and movies and, porn, making out with girls, fornicating or whatever, but you're a Christian and you're like, okay, now I'm going to start following Christ, and you just go to it whole hog, which is great, you're just going to understand, like, is going to be broken. Or that's maybe not a good example. A better example is like doing all this stuff and then like, I'm going to get married and I'm going to be a man. And then you get married and you're like, what have I gotten myself into? And then you can't guide your wife, you can't lead, you can't say no, you can't discipline, and life is a horrible wreck. And it's not that you can't come out of that, you can, it's just very painful. So, the next verse says, and so you are receiving the result of your faith, the salvation of your souls. Okay, so this is interesting. If you take that right after the first, in the context of the verses that we just read, it has a pretty powerful impact. You need to understand that you will receive the result of your faith. Again, these people are dying, they're being persecuted, and they have unspeakable joy. And so this is like, for Peter, he's excited. For us, we shouldn't just have this excitement. We have to hear that we're going to receive the result of our faith. But if your faith is lived out only in word, and your life and your mind are not truly given over to Christ, the result is that you will receive not the salvation of your soul. You understand that? So, but damnation of your soul. So, your life is an accumulation of actions and thoughts and a way of doing everything and thinking. And it results in something. It's going to result in something. And for them, the result of their life, which was persecution, they had unspeakable joy and glory because they loved Christ and they fulfilled his commandments and they did them. And it's exciting. But we live in a day where things are just so much more foggy and confused that we just have to just remind ourselves our lives are going to be examined. And Christ said at the end, the books will be opened and everything will be revealed. So it's not just a little game of patty cakes here. It's real life. And your soul is on the line. So how do you practice your faith? How do you practice your faith? Maybe this is the first time that you have ever even been presented with this idea that you have a faith. Some of you were just born in the faith. Some of you came in with your folks when you were little. Some of you found the faith when you were older. You who are older, probably you understand this. But you younger guys may be thinking to yourself, ooh, what does it even mean to practice the faith? Like I go to church, I do what my mom says, and that's the deal here. It cannot be your mother's faith. It cannot be your father's faith. It cannot be your grandfather's faith. You have to own the faith, and you have to live it. You have to live it. Like Christ is not going to judge you based on your parents' faith or your grandfather's faith or your brother's or sister's faith. You have to own it yourself. And it's going to be the result of your faith. So for some of you, maybe this is just awakening a reality like, oh, my whole life I just think about football and video games and movies and hunting and fishing and all this stuff. And it's just like, this is what my life is. And I'm an Orthodox Christian. I suggest I'm an Orthodox Christian. Well, if that's the way you're thinking, you're probably just cultural. It's just a cultural thing. And I can almost guarantee you, sometime in your life, these other things are going to just, they're so important that they'll eventually be like, well, it's okay to skip. It's okay to skip service. It's okay to skip. The next thing you know, you skip for a year or two, and then you're like, and sometimes never go back, but sometimes go back because you feel a little guilty or you really feel down and you go once and then you keep going and doing these things. This has to be reoriented. You have to get your life focused on Christ and on the faith first, and you have to own your own faith. So it shouldn't be your mom or your dad or your grandpa or your priest who's always saying like, so are you praying? Did you get your prayers done? So what have you been reading lately in the scriptures? Oh, you have it? Oh, you need to read. Let me check up on you. I mean, to be honest, I do this with my children, because that is a responsibility of parents too, to make sure their children are doing this. But if that's what you're depending on men to just make sure you get your stuff done, then you're probably not owning it like you need to. So, next verse is 1 Peter 3 through 21. It's a big passage here. So I'll read it and then we'll just break it down here. Therefore, prepare your minds for action. Now we are starting to get an idea of strength is going to be incorporated here. Be sober. Set your hope fully on the grace that is brought to you by the revelation of Jesus Christ. Be children of obedience, and do not conform yourselves to the former lusts, as in the days of your ignorance. But just as you were called, just as he who called you is holy, you yourself should also be holy in every aspect of your life. Because it is written, be holy, for I am holy. If you call on him who judges without discrimination, according to everyone's work as the Father, spend your lives as kings, princes, presidents of the world. No, it says, spend your lives as exiles here on earth in reverent fear. Know that it was not with corruptible things, such as gold and silver, that you were redeemed from the useless ways of life. So there's a useless way of life handed down to you by your forefathers. Instead, it was with the precious blood of the blameless and pure Lamb of Christ. He was foreknown even before the foundations of the world, but he was revealed in these last times for your sake. Through him you believe in God, who raised him from the dead and gave him glory, so that your faith and hope might be in God. Okay, so prepare your minds for action. Prepare your minds for action. So in this passage, we see that you need to prepare your minds for action. And you have to do that by considering the work that you're going to do, what you're going to be exposed to, and how you're supposed to execute that. And then when you start doing this, then you start practicing mentally, then actually on small levels. Like if you were in the military, you would be assigned to a certain thing. And they just wouldn't put you right in the battle just doing it. First off, you would sign up. You would have to think about the different options that you had. That's preparing your mind. Then you go to classes, usually. You're given a manual, and you have to think about it, meditate on what you're supposed to be doing. You start learning, then you start doing some hands-on stuff. But all this is just preparation. You're only preparing yourself. And then you go through your training period, that's preparation. And then you get into the battle, or whatever your job is. If you're a gunner, you're a tanker, you're doing all these different things. But you're trained in these things, but you just don't say like, yeah, I want to be airborne. And they're like, all right, we're going out today. Hop on the plane, strap your parachute on. All right, and then you're like, he's like, your turn, and you're like, did I put this thing on right? And you're like, oh no, you'll be fine. You probably did. Like nobody does that because you would die. So you have to prepare your mind. You have to prepare your mind. And then as you start thinking about preparing your mind, you have to be sober. We live in a world that's just so full of stupidity and buffoonery. I mean, everybody just wants to be laughy, happy, slappy. What's it? Happy, clappy, and slappy, something like this. But it's just like everybody just can't be sober. We need to be sober. So, sober means that you're not grumpy. Being sober does not mean you're grumpy all the time. But it does mean that you're serious most of the time. It's okay to cut loose with your friends sometimes, but if the whole practice of your life, it's like when you're done with your job and then you're just with the guys all the time, you're just like acting like a gorilla or something, or goofy all the time. This is not sober. It's not sober. And definitely, if you're being sober, you know definitely when you should be quiet, when you should be still, when you should give reverence to authorities. Your grandparents come in, you should give them honor. The older men in the parishes come in. They deserve reverence and honor. You need to be sober. If anybody who is older than you by, especially for you young guys, if there's somebody who's in that leadership role older than you, like 25, 30, 40, and they're speaking, you should just shut your mouth. If there's a priest ever speaking that is like in a room and he's like trying to talk to people, don't keep talking with your friends. You stop. If your father's talking to you, and it doesn't matter if you're a grown man or if he's talking and he's like, oh, I'd like to talk to you just stop and give him reverence. This is part of being sober. It's knowing when to have respect, or it is having respect at the right time. And being serious, because if you really knew how dangerous it was in the world, you would be very sober and it would be very scary. Seems like John Evan told me that when some other people have, after Lazarus, no, it was Dionysius, after Lazarus rose from the dead, he read something that he never ever smiled ever again.
Except one time.
Except one time.
When somebody was stealing a clay pot, and he said, a piece of dirt.
Clay steals the clay.
Yeah.
Clay stealing clay. But because he saw what it was like to enter into death. And it was such a terrifying thing. So, because we're all going to stand before the judgment seat of God, and when your body dies and your soul leaves, the demons will immediately begin to accuse you, instantaneously. Your soul will begin to leave your body, and the demons will begin to come and accuse you of all these things. And that is pretty sobering. And that's why when we are so satisfied with food and comfort and ease, we forget about the real reality. Like, life on earth is like about as small as the tiniest molecule in the ocean. It's much smaller than that, actually, life on earth. But that little tiny little molecule on earth is what sets the direction of all the rest of eternity. And I'm not just saying like eternity for human beings. Like, what we understand through the revelation of God is that it means eternity for on and 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 on for infinitum. But this little bit of life is what gets that direction set. It's like the preface of a book. But you write that. So set your hope fully on the grace by the revelation of Jesus Christ. Number 4, we are to be children of obedience. Children of obedience. So number 1, you need to obey God. And you do that by obeying Christ's teachings. So again, we circle back. Well, what are Christ's teachings? Well, they're in the New Testament very clearly. If you want to know what Jesus taught, read Jesus' teaching. Matthew 5, 6, and 7 particularly has very clear guidelines. And Luke 6, but also the parables, all through Matthew and all through Luke, are just chock full of the teachings of Christ. Also the teachings of the apostles. And you read them, and you apply them, and you obey them. But not only is that being a child of obedience, but obedience in general is the one thing that it pushes us towards righteousness, because we force ourselves to break our will. And our biggest problem is our will that is sick, not the healthy will, but the will that is sick. And the saints, especially, recently I've been reading the life and the teachings of St. Joseph of Hesychus, and he talks so much about obedience, how important obedience is. and how much strength and healing comes by us surrendering our will, submitting to some authority and saying, yeah, I was thinking about this. What do you think about this? It would be okay. Or the authority, whoever that is in your life, says, don't do this, do this. If you're still in the house and you have a father, you need to be obedient to him. If you aren't, but you need to check with your priest or your bishop or your spiritual father. You need to talk to them. And beyond this is just a side note, but all of you men, especially if you have Orthodox fathers, and you're making decisions in life, you really should communicate with your father, because even if they're not Orthodox, just because there's a wealth of knowledge in there, and they may give you an answer that you don't have to do, but definitely the benefits of respecting your father as the one whom God used to create you, and you just saying, hey, I was thinking about this, I just wanted to know what your thoughts were, and just hearing him out is very important. Definitely if you're in the house with your parents and your father tells you to do something, you should definitely just obey peacefully without fussing, unless it's against any of the teachings of Christ. If it's against the teachings of the Lord, then, don't do it. Talk to your priest about this and get specific guidance on how to do that. But obedience is super important. Number 5, do not conform your life to the former lusts. Those of you who were cradle Orthodox do not, you didn't have a former lust. You were born into the church. So how does this work for you if you were born into the church? Well, you have to see and understand what things are worldly and what things are considered the former lusts of this world. The problem is when people came to the New World was like this opportunity for people to gain wealth, and they didn't realize that so much of the stuff that they were getting themselves involved in wealth were actually things that would have been categorized as things part of the former lust. But because they were already Orthodox and there's all these new inventions, there's new stuff, should we be doing this or should we be doing that? Should we watch this? Should we listen to that? Should we go to this place or that place? These are things that they maybe didn't even consider. Is this okay or is it not okay? And over the course of time, you see, especially in the Greek churches and the other churches that had huge populations here that came and settled, their ethnic populations have just fallen off over the years, just simply because they've just become so worldly. They just don't even go to the church anymore, because they didn't reject the former lusts. So he's talking to people who were all converts, right? Everybody in the church at this time were converts. They were all in the world, and they had certain things. Then they came into the church, and they were under the apostles' teachings, and it was very serious. It was a death penalty to be a Christian, and they were not doing worldly things. It was this time when the apostles were saying, don't read stuff that's outside of the Old Testament. Don't go to the theater. Don't do this. Don't do that. This is how they lived. It was super serious. I'm not saying to you, no, you can't watch movies. I'm not saying that. But I do think that you need to be very serious. These things are not what the early church did. And I would propose to you that if you spent your time working hard at a job and meditating on Christ and the teachings of the apostles and praying, and then when you got done with your job, then you spent your spare time serving in the church services under your bishop and your priest, and then if you have more time to be with your family, and then in your spare time, you served people who needed help, and you didn't waste your time doing stupid stuff like watching movies or playing video games or the other stuff that we've already talked about, because time lends to these bad things. So if you did that, maybe what happened in the early church would happen. Do you realize that in just 60 years, most of the world was exposed to Christianity, and huge portions of the population of the world became Christians very fast. Christianity went from Jerusalem all the way up into the British Isles, all the way into India and China before the year AD 100. Can you believe that? How did that happen? I guarantee you they weren't sitting around when they got off work saying, I want to spend about 3 hours going to the theater and watching this new show. It's fabulous. And it's a multi-series, so I've got to watch it every night. 45 minutes every night watching this series. I promise you, this is not the ethos that they had. They didn't waste time. So it's about being sober. So, yep.
Do you have thoughts on the idea of being a workaholic as in like a negative connotation?
Yeah, I think so. So work is one of these things that is dangerous. So you can work too much because you really, most of the time it comes down to pride or avarice, okay? So some people are trying to build a business, like let's say your tree business or a mowing business, and you just have to work. I mean, like usually you have to work a regular job just to survive, and then you go home and you start doing your business with your family. That's just the way that the life of humanity always was. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's that when your business is really doing well, or you work for somebody and you want your boss to notice you, or the danger is like you get good and you have this pride. It's like, I'm the best at this and I'm going to do this and I want people to know, or I just know that I am and so I'm going to do this. Or maybe it's an addiction thing. There's some of this involved too. But you have to have your priorities straight. You have to be praying. You have to be praying with your family. You have to be guiding them. And if you can't do that and still work, some people have an energy level that they can work and work and work. And so they can do all those things and still get a lot of hours in of production. But I think that life is not about work. Life is about worshiping God, and your job should be the thing that supplements your ability to worship God and to serve people. Right. So the focus should be worshiping God in the community of the fellowship, and to provide for your family and to guide your family, and to use extra to meet the needs of those who are not as blessed as you. But in our society, actually, the young men who are coming into the church now, I think that the most important thing, because if you lived 2,000 years ago and you were a Christian and you had a job, and then when your job got done, you went home and you didn't sit down and just do stuff. You got home, then you went and you got your buckets, you went and filled your water up, and you lit your fire, and you got wood and all this stuff. Stuff that we think of as work was just how they existed. So it wasn't like they had this like 12 hours of work, and then they came home and they just, grabbed the newspaper and read. I mean, there was some people who had slaves, but most people were poor slaves. Our young men who are converting now, I would submit to you that the last thing that they need to do is have any time to get on the computer, and definitely not to think about theology or read any theological books. What they need to do is they need to get under the authority of their local priest, and he needs to push them rigorously to work hard. Like, I think the best thing for a lot of these young men who are converting is to make sure that they go to all of the services, that they're praying every morning and every night, and that there's some sort of prayer rule that their priest is giving them, and that they work 1 or 2 or 3 jobs so that they can practice being broken, so they can practice being under a boss who is going to be hard, and hopefully they get a boss that's really mean. Like, I'm serious. I think this is very important that they get under a boss that's really mean, so that they can learn to deal with their passions. And this is what we do as parents. This is what you should do if you are a parent, or if you are going to be a parent. When your children are little, you should give them work to do, and you should watch them so you can see, oh, there's laziness there, or oh, there's selfishness there, or oh, there's definitely pride there, or oh, there's vengeance here. oh, there's bitterness there. And then as parents, you help deal with them that way. Now, when you're a man and you come into the church really late, your priest has to do this, and you have to be honest, like we were talking about last night. You have to be honest with yourself. But if you just have this cushy job that you just totally love and it's easy, and you don't have anybody like putting their thumb on you, you're not going to grow. And besides that, if you just have one job and it's like 25 hours or 30 hours, and you have all sorts of extra time, and that's what takes you to the screen. You're watching movies, you're just hanging out and doing dumb stuff. And then at the end of the day, you have tons of regret. So that's my prescription for young men, is to work. But not at the expense of not praying or becoming familiar with the teachings of Christ and the apostles. I think that has to be number one. But to work hard, I just don't know that there's more better healing mechanism for our young men in this world than to just work hard and have somebody who is a compassionate taskmaster who can say, like, I love you, but you're just a whiner. Get back out there and get this done. I'm sorry, you just got to do this. And it's hard. I mean, I try to do that, but it still is hard. It may not seem like it to some of the people around me, but it is really hard. It's not what I'd like to do, but I think it's important. So then he says this. Oh, okay, here he goes on to say, you must be holy in every area of your life, just like God is holy. You are to be set apart from the things of those in the world and the things that the world does. Your life really should look much different. So, ask yourself, what does the majority of the world do with their free time?
TikTok.
Sports, movies, comedians. I mean, you just have to ask yourself, because everybody has their own personality, so everybody's going to be kind of drawn to a different thing that's worldly. Like, I played football for 11 years. It was my life. But then when I started asking this question, I'm not saying that watching football is worldly necessarily. I'm just saying that it is very obvious that most people in the world spend the majority of God's time watching something. Like, I watched football on Saturday mornings, Saturday all day, from 8 a.m. to 7 or 8 when I was in high school, because there was just games on all day. I loved it. That's like 12 hours of God's time that I just sat on the couch watching, all this fun stuff. So, it's just like, what are you doing and what is the world doing? And you just need to see, this is probably not good, or this is good, and just separate yourself. And that's what it is to be holy. Holy means to be set apart. To be set apart. You're different. Like, the world should know that you're Christians. We don't do this. Your friends, maybe you have associates or friends in high school or in college or at work, and they're like, hey, you want to come and do this with us? You just say, I don't do that. I'm a Christian. We don't do that stuff. Oh, you're a Christian. They may laugh at you, or they may ridicule you, but some of them may feel like, wow, this guy, man, I really respect him. He's not compromising. I know people who have done that, and they kind of got beat up for a long time, and then finally people are like, I really respect you for this. Even though they were tested. I don't think they knew they were being tested, but they were. Spend your time as exiles. Does anybody know what it is to be an exile?
Driven away from your home?
Or an exile, yeah, you're driven away from home, and you're like a pilgrim in a new place. Like this, when I was gonna move to Russia, and I was thinking, like, how is this gonna work? And what you realize very quickly is how you kind of take things for granted in your own country, because you're thinking, how can I live in this new land and not have a whole bunch of people dislike me? So I'm going to live especially uprightly, so no one suspects me of doing anything wrong. I'm going to be open, I'm going to be clean, I'm going to do all the laws. I'm not going to be like, I'm an American and I have freedom and you can't tell me what to do. No, that's not what you do when you go to Russia. You say, oh, what was that law? Oh, I'm sorry, officer, I'll do this. But you live as exiles because it's not your home. It's not your home. And this earth and the country that you live in and the state that you live in, that is not your home. You're living there temporarily, but if you're an Orthodox Christian, your home and your realm is the kingdom of God. It's the kingdom of God. It really is a whole realm. It has laws. It has restrictions. It has a focus that you're supposed to be doing certain things at certain times, and you have responsibilities. So you need to live as exiles. And you need to always remember that you are not your own. At the end of that passage, he said that you were bought with a price, and that price was Christ. So again, we come back to this. You don't own yourself. And especially as an Orthodox Christian, I mean, nobody on the face of the earth owns themselves. Everybody is owned by the Creator God. And he owns everything. They don't know it. You should know it. You are not your own. You are Christ. And when you become a Christian, part of that is you are declaring, I realize that I'm not my own. You own me. I'm yours. I am your slave. And I renounce the works of Satan. I renounce my rebellious life that I had when I didn't recognize that you own me. And I'm going to do everything in my life for you and for your glory. That means all of your time, all of your interests, all of your pastime and free time and hobbies has got to be in a line with what would be pleasing to the king. If it is not pleasing to the king in any way, you shouldn't do it. If you're going to watch a movie and there's sex scenes, you should just simply not watch that movie. Like, you can find out, you can read it like, oh, does this have anything? I would propose to you that movies, for the most part, are just an absolute, complete waste of time. Sometimes they're okay. But I'm just saying, like, if you are thinking in the realm of like, oh, this is God's time, I'm taking God's time and I'm going to do something for me in God's time. Most people just live their life as if God's time is their time, but it's actually God's time and you're just stealing from it. So as you begin to transfer the way that you think, you should think, this is God's time. This is God's time. If you were in my house, you would hear me say to some of my sons, like, why do you keep wasting God's time? It's like, what are you wasting God's time for? It's not your time. Like, you want to do this business or that business for what? Like, for you, for your prestige? Because you want to get rich? I mean, like, that money that you would make is God's money. So make sure you keep everything focused around the sinner, which is God, and his desire for everybody, because you're a part of a community. You're not some individual that's disconnected from everybody. Your choices affect everybody. So if you're going to start a business or you're going to go get a job, like, I want to go get a job. Well, what kind of job? Well, I don't know. I just want to make a lot of money. Well, are you going to be able to still worship with your fellow Christians? Well, I maybe have to be gone for a long time. Well, then maybe you shouldn't have that job. Okay. Yeah, we're going to be done in just 5 minutes. Yeah, so next thing. 1 Peter, then we're going to end with these two verses. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 22 through 24. Having purified your soul, be obedient to the truth. Through the Spirit, love one another with a pure heart, in sincere brotherly affection, and fervently You have been born again, not of corruptible, but of incorruptible seed, through the word of God, which lives and remains forever. Truly, all flesh is like grass, and all of man's glory like a flower of the grass. And the grass withers and its flowers fall, but the word of the Lord endures forever. This is the word of the good news which was preached to you. So, he says, having purified your souls. That's an assumption. You have to ask yourself, have you purified your soul? Some of the purpose for our being here is to work on purity, purification. Some may be addicted to things that they wish they weren't. Some aren't. Some of us, and most of us, are all tempted to do things that are not pure. So, if we aren't pure and we know it, you need to get help. You need to get help from a priest or a spiritual father. If you are, but you're not having any addictions or anything like this, continue to ask yourself, how am I thinking? What am I thinking? And pray that God would help purify you. You know, it says, Jesus says, blessed are the pure in heart, or what? They will see God. They will see God. St. Joseph and St. Elder Ephraim of Arizona say that as we pray and we're doing the Jesus prayer and we are pulling ourselves away from this world and we're getting all of this stuff out and we're moving in our ascetic struggle, that when we attain purity is when we start beginning to enter into the state of theosis, which is true theology, truly beginning to understand God, truly beginning to see things about God that we never have, that will then lead us on into maybe seeing the uncreated light of Christ and God. So purifying your life is very important. This is purifying your souls by obedience to the truth. But what's truth? What are we supposed to obey?
Christ is the truth.
Christ is the truth. So we have to obey Christ's teachings. So do you know what Christ taught? Can you, in your mind right now, conjure up 10 things that Jesus taught? They should be in our mind, just like they should just be. It should be in so implanted in the way you think that you should, love my enemies, be pure, be humble. You know, all of these things. I mean, you could just, do you know that if you're an Air Force pilot or if you're in any of the military in the old days, it's just a few years ago, but they're supposed to be getting back to this. It sounds like they're going to get some standards again. But in the military, especially if you're an Air Force pilot, you have to read all these manuals and then you have to practice them and you have to have tests and you have to be able to know if this happens, we do boom, 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 boom. I mean, you have to be able to say and write out what you do. Because if you're flying a jet and somebody's behind you and they're just about to shoot a missile at you, you know, there's all these things you can do, but you have to know right like this. And it's not like they're just like, hey, let's go to a conference. And, you know, Elias, so if you're up there and you get this Russian jet behind you and they get a missile lock on you, you want to do this and this and this and this. Okay, now hop in that jet and go for it, buddy. Like, it's not like that. It's like, here, read this manual, read it again. Now, start testing yourself over and over again, and then we're going to test you, and if you flunk, then you have to do this whole process again, and then we're going to put you in this other thing where you're practicing, and then if you mess up, then you flunk, and then you go back and you read your book again, and you test, because they make it so the way you think is you just think this way. It's just how you think. That's how it is supposed to be with the teachings of Christ and the apostles. It should be so in your mind, indelibly imprinted, that when you are then away from whatever you're doing and you're with some buddies and instantly they're like, hey, let's do this. Boom. It comes to your mind. Oh, we can't do this, guys. We're not doing this. Oh, come on, Elias, let's. You're like, no, I'm a Christian. We don't do this. We just don't do this. I mean, like, you can hang out with me. Like, that's how you have to say it. Like, you can hang out with me, buddy, But we're not doing your thing. I mean, just take the higher road. And it's that way from the youngest age up to, I mean, like, it never ends until you die. Old guys still do things that they shouldn't do when they're together. I mean, they're still rascals, just like all of us. So it doesn't just stop at a certain age. Like, it seems that way when you're young. You think like, oh, those people never would do anything bad because they have gray hair, but it's not the truth. We all have our problems and our struggles. So, okay, any questions or thoughts? Because that's all we have for now. And then, I mean, we actually have more, but because we have the whole book, but we're not going to get through it for sure when we're here. So that's why I want you to read it. But any questions on this? We'll pray, we'll do cleanup crew, and then we'll get some organization going. Okay, well, let's pray. We'll thank God for the lesson.